Ram V and Mike Perkins head into the very far future of the DC Universe to tell a story of Swamp Thing and his nomadic people traveling the world to find the last humans left alive. But Swamp Thing's mission might just doom him and his people. Ram V continues his horror-centric stories with Swamp Thing, diving headfirst into the being's whole existence and how in this possible future world, he has become a type of god and even a Moses-type character for his new race of tree people, shepherding them across the country as he searches for the final few survivors of the human race. On top of that heavily religiously inspired story, we also get some more religious stuff throughout the issue, all of which is really actually quite great and tasteful. The main plot point being Kala, this little girl that Swamp Thing is traveling with, and how Swamp Thing himself represents the good, sort of the good angel on her shoulder, while this character called Indigo represents the devil on the other side of her shoulder, both battling over the very soul of this girl and trying to turn the future generations one way or another. Speaking of Indigo, I actually quite liked his role in this issue as just this sort of mischievous, Loki-like character that's always stoking the fires and just sitting back to watch the chaos ensue. He's always making snide comments at Swamp Thing or Heather's expense, and it just drives them insane, and it's really fun to watch. Throughout the book as well, Ram V also gives us some really cool monologues on Swamp Thing going through his process of making a better species and trying to not fall into the pitfalls of humanity's existence, which all sort of resulted in war and violence. He doesn't really want that for his people, and he goes into these extra little details about how their lungs work and how their bodies were different and everything, and it's stuff like that. I really like when comics do that sort of stuff because it's extra thought on the writer's part, which is for the betterment of us since we get to understand what he's trying to do a little bit better. It's always really fun experimenting with that sort of stuff, and here it paid off really greatly, and I'm looking forward to seeing if there's more of that in the next issue. Mike Perkins lends his terrifically dark and detailed art to the book, perfectly encapsulating this far future post-apocalyptic world as well as the savage beauty of Swamp Thing and his people. His designs for Swamp Thing and all his people like Indigo, Heather and Kala were all really well done, and I like that they were all easily distinguishable from one another. They all have very different silhouettes, all of which we actually get to see throughout the issue. Mike's colorist, June Chung, also deserves a lot of praise for her colors, which of course were mostly greens being that Swamp Thing, but I also like that she offset that with many yellows and red backgrounds and blue backgrounds coming from fires or explosions or the harshness of the northern snows. Future State Swamp Thing issue 1 was a really awesome and mostly standalone Future State story that dived into Swamp Thing's new status quo as a Moses-type character for his people and the problems he must deal with while in that role. I thoroughly enjoyed his new directions as well as the hints of the villains and other heroes teased in the final page, which will no doubt be fully revealed next issue. I'm going to give this issue a 9 out of 10. Future State Swamp Thing issue 1 finds Swamp Thing remembering how he begun building a better human-like species, but knows that he will always remember the first species. Soon Kala asks the being what happened to the world, telling the girl that change in the world all comes from violence, and no one embodied this idea better than humans. Humans who tamed fire and built great cities, and whose machines and heroes developed powers beyond their comprehension. Humans, however, also had an imperfection, becoming preoccupied with violence, perfecting it until the world fought back against it and consumed the humans and their heroes, and then everything changed. Kala says that Heather told her that they were born from fallen leaves, and Swamp Thing knows that in a way they were, but Heather likes to make things up. She asks the Green Father why they search for the humans if they are also flawed and broken. Indigo pipes up, wondering also why they do that, knowing that humans can't possibly exist now and what draws Swamp Thing to them. Swamp Thing tells Indigo to shut up, and so does Kala, but he says the child is rather foolish, knowing that he doesn't lead the child astray like Swamp Thing is doing. Swamp Thing grabs Indigo, demanding he be quiet as the being continues to goad Swamp Thing, telling the being to show Kala the real Swamp Thing. The hero takes his leave, knowing that Indigo isn't worth it, as Kala spots some smoke and fire from one of the many destroyed buildings nearby, signaling there could possibly be people. Swamp Thing continues to remember what went into building the new human and how he wasn't held back by more human limitations, proud of Heather, one of his first creations, when she first begun running. Swamp Thing arrives at the fire, learning that it was thanks to the plant people, who came there when the human machines were still running, and Vrook was caught by one of them and was set on fire. Swamp Thing learns that Heather is there as the woman heroically saves another of their kind, jumping from the building as it explodes. The group aren't safe yet as the building begins to crumble thanks to the explosion and fire. Luckily, Swamp Thing grows out of the ground, protecting his people by holding up the building. Later on at their camp, Heather reassures Kala that the one they saved will be fine. All he needs is some sunlight and water, telling the little girl to get some sleep so she can have a pretty flower head in the morning. Heather leaves the group to visit Swamp Thing, learning from the being what he saw in the roots and what they are saying about the storm that will hit in 6 days. Swamp Thing asks about Vrook, and Heather knows that he'll be fine with some rest, but there are signs of humans in the tower and it might have been a trap for them, something Heather knows her friend was asking the trees about, wanting to learn if there are more humans around. Swamp Thing doesn't deny it, learning the humans went north, but that was a very long time ago. He wonders if Heather has thought about why he searched for them, wondering if she resents him for it. From a nearby tree, Indigo says that she does, but Swamp Thing only asks so he can continue doing it, finding it all so tragic. Heather tells him to shut up, but Indigo knows everyone hates him for telling it how it is. Heather tells Swamp Thing not to pay him any attention, since she and the others are with him for however long he wishes to search. Swamp Thing says that in that case they'll head north where it has begun snowing hard. Along their travels, Swamp Thing remembers making the transpiratory organs for his people, finding wonder in the little pieces that came together to make the lungs, and the sound of the water in them that gave the body colour. During their travels up north, Swamp Thing's party finds that one of their own has been killed during the night, gutted like an animal. The group find the tracks left by whatever did this, following them into the nearby woods and to a cave where they find a man with a spear. Heather quickly attacks the man, taking the spear and snapping it, but before she can kill the man, Swamp Thing stops her, since this is what they have been searching for. Heather is outraged since this man killed Bogan, but Swamp Thing says that this man is afraid and alone, and he can't even perceive their voices, making them all seem like monsters to him, so they need to show some kindness. He tells Heather to gather the others and to leave the cave and leave him and the man alone. Heather leads the others outside, where Indigo again goads Heather, saying that she was sent away like some stepchild so Swamp Thing could talk to the real human and his real child. Heather grabs the being, hitting him and breaking his jaw, but that doesn't stop Indigo blabbering, calling Heather foolish. Swamp Thing meanwhile gives the man some food, talking to him and telling him who he is or was. He wants to know where the man came from and if there are any more in a community elsewhere. The man says his name is Venom and he came from the Star Fortress way up north where the snow is always falling and no plants or trees grow. He says he came looking for others like him, having heard stories of the world and how it came to be thanks to the being from the swamp. He doesn't care for what Swamp Thing did, only coming down to find the being to ask him for help. Venom tells him how there were 15 people like him, all who left the fortress to search the world, called rebels and traitors who were soon hunted by the people from the Star Fortress. He says the Undying Man convinced them all that he had once seen the world before this and claimed they need to fight back for fear of being erased. But others spoke out about this and what he and the fortress were really doing, like his father who was hung for treason, but not before Venom was told all about the Undying Man and the coming of the Obsidian Sun. He pleads with Swamp Thing to help him as Anton Arcane, the Undying Man, waits for Swamp Thing to come and find him so he can show his old friend what he has become and that the everlasting darkness can finally take the world.